Mr. Bowen is the Executive Vice President of Prestige Ameritech, which is America's largest domestic surgical mask maker. I want to thank you, Mr. Bowen, for flying from Texas to be with us today. Your story is a very powerful one. And to my colleagues, Mr. Bowen has been, I think really, he wins an award for tenacity because over 3 presidential administrations, he's been banging on the door, warning, asking for, pointing out that America has a dangerous dependence on foreign countries for products that we need here at home. So this is very important testimony, and we welcome you. We thank you for traveling to be with us today with all the extenuating circumstances to travel, and we're very grateful to you. So you are now recognized for your statement, and then we will. And then you will hear from the members, and I'm sure both your statement will provoke questions and that you'll get good ones from both sides of the aisle. I should add something here, and that is this issue of our terrible dependence on foreign countries for not only our drugs, our nation's critical drug supply, but also all of the materials that we've been talking about is an issue that's been, is shared. The concern is shared on both sides of the aisle. As I said previously today, I think it was this morning and not this afternoon, that we've had bipartisan legislation on it. But we want to hear from you. We want to hear your story. I think it's a very important one, and I know the members will as well. I want to invite, at this point, the ranking member to welcome our guest because he is his constituent. So to Dr. Burgess.
Always good to welcome a Texan to our committee. It's always a good day we have a Texan at the witness stand. We know we're going to hear the truth. I will say I've been on this committee since 2005. In my second term on the committee, in the year that started 2007, then Chairman Dingell had a hearing on the amount of active pharmaceutical ingredient that we imported from other places, in particular China. Shortly after that, we had a problem with heparin contamination. We've had a number of hearings on this with lead-based toys, melamine in our pet food. And there's been a number of concerns about why we continue to use a supply chain when from time to time it's detrimental to us. So if there's any bright spot in this current crisis that we're in, it may be that finally, after 13 or 14 years, we seriously move to make stuff here, be our providers for ourselves, and quite frankly, America first really should mean something. But I welcome you here today, Mr. Bowen. We're anxious to hear what you have to say.
I think made in America. Anyway, welcome, Mr. Bowen, and you have the floor now. You have 5 minutes for your testimony. If you want to place your statement in the record and just speak or read, it's up to you. But welcome and thank you for joining us today. It's already afternoon. You need to turn your microphone on.
Good morning, Chairwoman Eshoo and Ranking Member Burgess. Thank you for your invitation. It's my pleasure to testify. My name is Michael Bowen, and I am the Executive Vice President of Prestige Ameritech of North Richland Hills, Texas. And I have been in the medical industry since 1986 and with Prestige Ameritech since 2006. Prestige Ameritech was founded by President and CEO Dan Reese in 2005. I'm going to give a brief overview of my interactions with BARDA and its directors, but first I'll give you some pertinent mask industry history. Until 2004, 90% of all surgical masks worn, and I'm including surgical respirators, were domestically made. That year, or around that year, all of the major domestic mask sellers switched from selling domestically made masks to selling imported masks. Prestige Ameritech, who was founded in 2005, recognized this as a security issue in 2006. We thought that once America's hospitals learned that their mask supplies were subject to diversion by foreign governments during pandemics, they would switch back to US-made masks. We were wrong. In November of 2007, we received a phone call from BARDA asking for a tour of our mask factory. BARDA was acting on George W. Bush's Presidential Directive 21, the purpose of which was to review America's disaster plans. Brenda Hayden with BARDA gave a presentation which showed that BARDA was concerned about the foreign-controlled mask supply. We were thrilled that BARDA had discovered the issue until Brenda said that BARDA was only charged with studying the problem. We were disappointed, but we took consolation in the fact that finally a federal agency knew that the mask supply was in danger. We were very happy to have an ally. 2 years later, I received a call from Brenda Hayden. She started the conversation by saying, "We have a situation." Her serious tone caused me to ask her if she was talking about a pandemic, and she said yes. She asked if we could ramp up production, and I said yes. We built more machines, bought an abandoned Kimberly-Clark mask factory, tripled our workforce. America's hospitals needed us, and we rose to the occasion. We told them about the high cost of ramping up, and they said they would stay with us. Unfortunately, most returned to buying cheaper foreign-made masks when they became available. The company survived by laying off the 150 people who helped save the U.S. mask supply, by taking pay cuts, and by taking on more investors. The H1N1 pandemic, this is 2009, 2010, wasn't severe enough to cause the foreign health officials to cut off mask shipments to America, so our predictions didn't come true yet. In a weakened state but undaunted, Prestige Ameritech continued saying that the U.S. mask supply was headed for failure. We just didn't know when. In 2004, to give my security story more issue, I formed the Secure Mask Supply Association. You can find it at securemasksupply.org. Paraphrasing Ben Franklin, I told 3 competing domestic mask makers that if we didn't hang together, we would hang separately, as China was poised to put all of us out of business and put the country at even greater risk. Crosstex, Gerson, and Medicom, all with domestic mask-making factories, agreed and joined the SMSA. Unfortunately, the Secure Mask Supply Association's warnings were also unheeded. During my quest to secure the U.S. mask supply, I had the privilege of working with 3 BARDA directors, Dr. Robin Robinson, Dr. Richard Hatchett, and Dr. Rick Bright. They were helpful, and they encouraged me to continue warning people about the mask supply. I'll say a little bit more about that. After years of doing this, I quit many times, and the only reason I kept doing it is because of the directors of BARDA. They would encourage me and ask me not to quit. They said that they would express their concerns about the mask supply to anyone that I could get to call them, anyone except reporters. They weren't allowed to talk to reporters, which was very frustrating to me. They also weren't allowed to endorse the Secure Mask Supply Association. Dr. Robinson was going to do so until HHS attorneys told him that it could cost him his job. He called me personally on vacation to tell me that. I can confirm that the emails in Dr. Bright's complaint are mine. They are merely the latest of 13 years of emails I sent to BARDA in an effort to get HHS to understand that the U.S. mask supply was destined for failure. Robinson, Hatchett, and Bright all wanted to remedy the problem. In my opinion, they didn't have enough authority. Their hearts were in the right places. America was told after 9/11 that governmental silos had been torn down so that different federal agencies could work together for national securities. But I didn't see any of that. The DOD, the VA, the CDC, and HHS could have worked together to secure America's mask supply. I had suggested this to BARDA and to the CDC on several occasions. I will be happy to answer any questions that you have about Prestige Ameritech, the U.S. mask supply, or my interactions with BARDA, the CDC, or Rick Bright. And again, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowen, again for traveling across the country to be with us and for your testimony. We'll now move to member questions, and I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. You were already touched on your acknowledgement of your emails or description about your actions that were in Dr. Bright's complaint, so I'll move past that. To the best of your knowledge, is the section of Dr. Bright's complaint about the mask supply accurate?
Yes.
Should HHS and the administration have been able to foresee, in your view, the mask shortages caused by the pandemic?
Yes.
How many of your mask lines are not activated right now?
4.
4. My goodness. And as we have a run on supplies, you have 4 lines that could be working and manufacturing high-grade masks for those that need them in our country.
Yes, but not like turning on a light switch. It's a very large project.
And just spend a moment to tell us what it takes to bring those up.
Well, the machines were built
If you
in
were
China.
to receive orders now to activate those lines, explain that to us. And how many more masks could you be manufacturing right now?
We could be making about 7 million N95 respirators a month. However, again,
Did you say a month?
it's, yes, a month.
So say that again, the number of masks?
7 million N95 respirators per month. But again, it's not like turning on a switch. We didn't build these particular machines. They were from China, and we got them in an acquisition several years ago. So my email to Rick Bright, in that email I said, I think we're in trouble. We have these machines. It would be expensive and hard to get them going, but if this is going to be bad, that could happen. So that was my offer.
Very often, especially for lawyers in courtrooms and elsewhere, when you're going to ask a question, they say you should know the answer. I think I know the answer to this question, but I want to hear your view on it. We've allowed this supply, this very important supply of protective articles to other countries. Do you believe it's because of saving nickels, dimes, and quarters?
I call it chasing pennies to China. Mm-hmm. It's that insistence.
And look what it has cost us.
It's cost us lives.
It cost us lives. It's cost us lives. If there's someone that would like me to yield the rest of my time, I'd be glad to. If not, we can go to the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Walden.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Bowen.
Thank you.
thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll let you reset the clock, too, so I don't go over my
Yeah, it's
allotted
right,
time.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
There we go. And Ms. Bowen, thank you. Thank you for being here. And I appreciate your testimony, which I read last night. Toward the end of the last panel, I received a copy of an email that you sent to Dr. Bright on January 31st of this year. This email appears to be the one included in Dr. Bright's complaint. though it is one of the exhibits that was not publicly posted by the Washington Post, interestingly enough. Here's what the complaint says. 2 days later, Mr. Bowen of Prestige Ameritech sent yet another email to Dr. Bright and Dr. Wolf, once again issuing a dire warning about the imminent mass shortage. Among other things, he advised, and I quote, "This week we sent 1,000 masks to China and Hong Kong." Now, I believe your email actually says 1,000,000 masks to China and Hong Kong. He continued, quote, "In all my years of predicting the U.S. mask supply would one day collapse, I never pictured myself selling masks to China. I have it from 2 reliable sources. China's begun telling Chinese mask makers not to let masks leave China," close quote. He concluded, "I think China will cut off masks to the USA. If so, U.S. hospitals are going to have a very rough time, as up to half the supply is made in China. A horrible situation will become unbearable." That's the
That is my email, yes, sir.
And that's your email, okay. In the complaint, this is cited as an email from L. Wolf to R. Bright on January 29, 2020. I think that citation is obviously wrong, since even the complaint acknowledges that it's an email from you, Mr. Bowen, to Dr. Bright, right?
That's
your email.
That was my email. I don't know how it got to him, but I mean, I don't know.
How it got to
Yeah, I don't know what emails chain you're looking at, but yes, sir, that was my email.
Well, I was reading from Mr. Bright's complaint, and I just received, I think, what appears to be a copy of this email. I think it's cited wrong in the complaint. The email I received is dated January 31st, 2020. It includes all the language that I just read to you from the complaint, and this is exactly why the committee not only needs all the exhibits cited by Dr. Bright, not just the ones selectively obtained by the Washington Post, and needs the full email chains, not just the selective excerpts from Dr. Bright. Because this document also says, and I will quote, this is your email to Dr. Bright and to Laura Wolf. It says, and I quote, "My government strategy is to help the U.S. government if and only if the VA and DOD become my customers after this thing is over."
Yes, sir.
So, Madam Chair, I'd like to submit the email for the record. We'll send you an electronic copy as per our agreements here. Now, Mr. Bowen, I'm sorry. You said you have, you want to help U.S. government, you want to help Americans get the masks. Yet it appears that there seems to be a condition here. I assume that's because in the past you ramped up, things went away, people bought from other manufacturers. And so here you're saying, and I have it here in the email, my strategy is to help my existing customers and only bring on new customers who are willing to sign a long-term contract. My government strategy is to help the U.S. government if and only if the VA and DOD become my customers after this thing is over. And here we were in a crisis as masks were going overseas. Now, the U.S. government's not your only purchaser, right?
U.S. government has never bought from me except during a pandemic, sir.
Okay,
And that email and that statement was basically saying that I don't want the government to only call me in a pandemic.
Okay.
Give me business during peacetime so that I can survive to help you during a pandemic.
Did you ever ask for a sole source contract?
I have bid on the DOD and the VA business, and I continually lose to masks that are made in Mexico because the DOD does not obey the Berry Amendment. They buy foreign masks made in Mexico because Mexico is a friend of ours and is called a TAA-compliant country.
Were your masks not NIOSH 95
make the decision
approved?
Based on price,
How
not
long,
national security.
Sir, if I could reclaim my time. How long, you said you couldn't turn on these lines of manufacturing very quickly. How long, if you got a big order from the government today, would it take you to produce masks?
3 or 4 months, and the government wants to do that right now. HHS is asking me to do that.
And it will take you 3 to 4 months?
Yes, I told them it's going to take 3 or 4 months They only want masks to the end of the year, so I would have to hire 100 people, train 100 people, and then fire them at the end of the program. I'm not going to do that. Again, I don't want the government to only deal with me when
Time
there's
has
a
expired,
pandemic.
Madam Chair. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. It's a pleasure to recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Engel, for his 5 minutes of questions.
Well, thank you. Let me get this down. Voila. Thank you, Mr. Bowen. I've been listening to your, and thank you, Madam Chair. This is an excellent hearing, and it's an issue that we need to focus on because it has repercussions that just continue and continue. Every day I hear from my constituents, including doctors and nurses serving on the front lines of this pandemic, about the dire shortages of personal protective equipment and therapeutics, PPEs, as they call them. Recently, I helped author the Preventing Drug Shortages Act with several of my colleagues on this subcommittee, provisions which were included in the recently enacted CARES Act. This all ties together. I've used my role as chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee to cut through red tape and bring much-needed supplies like 100,000 antibody tests for New York City from China. All these actions, as you point out, Mr. Bowen, are symptoms of a larger problem. Most U.S. medical products are manufactured abroad. And as this pandemic has highlighted, this leaves the United States vulnerable in public health crises and obviously poses a national security threat, the way I look at it. So, Mr. Bowen, as we can tell this afternoon and reading all about you, things you've said, things you've written, you've certainly been a leading advocate for this issue, specifically as it pertains to face masks, which have never been more in demand than now. Took mine over there. In your written testimony, you note that in 2004, major domestic surgical mask sellers switched from making surgical masks domestically to importing them. I know you spoke a little bit about it, but could you go into more detail and explain what prompted this change?
Mask companies wanting to make more profit. So they go to countries, well, it's not just mask companies, it's people who are in the hospital industry who are competing for contracts, for supplies. And it's a bid-type situation most of the time. And the way you make products cheaply is to make them in China and Mexico and other places. So that's why the U.S. mask supply left. It wasn't a coordinated effort. It was a bunch of companies coincidentally deciding to save money at the same time and destroying maybe 4,000 jobs in America and putting the U.S. mask supply under foreign control. And that's been my message since 2006, actually.
Well, it's really unbelievable because it isn't just foreign control, it's a very large degree to China control. When we look at, again, I'm chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, when we look at the geopolitical parts of the world, China is probably the biggest adversary to the United States. So not only are we leaving it in their hands, we're leaving it in the hands of an adversary, and we're sort of beholden to that country. And I cannot think of much that's more dangerous than that. So I'm sure you agree.
China controls most of the world's mask supply. China can sell a box of masks for $1 a box. Or let me say this, China sells a box of masks for $1. I don't think anybody's making any profit doing that because I sell them for about $5. So their prices are so cheap that they've captured most of the world's mask market.
Does their government subsidize the Chinese government, the Beijing government?
I don't know that. I don't know. All I know is their masks cost less than the materials. If I take my labor costs totally out, I'm still nowhere near the cost of their products.
Do the Chinese masks meet our standards?
Some do, some don't.
What steps can the federal government take to incentivize more medical manufacturing of critical equipment like surgical face masks in the United States?
Well, as in a letter that I sent to President Obama, I don't think it requires money. I think it requires the government saying it is a national security problem. It requires the CDC telling America's hospitals they are too dependent on foreign-made masks and put them in legal liability. They have to protect their patients and staff. If in a public forum like this, you say, this is a national security issue, then those hospitals' attorneys are probably going to get on the ball and tell their hospitals to buy American-made products. And they don't cost that much. The whole market is only a couple of $100 million. This whole problem, this is a $30 million problem, folks, just for people trying to save pennies across the whole United States. It's not some multi-billion-dollar problem.
Could you repeat that again and lean forward into that microphone so that everybody hears it again?
I said this is a $30 million problem. It's not billions and billions of dollars. I've never asked for money. In a letter to President Obama, and I wrote President Trump as well, but in a letter to President Obama, I said that this isn't about money. This is about information. Tell America's hospitals that they are going to be in a position to not be able to protect their staff and their patients. And their attorneys, those hospital attorneys, will tell their hospital to buy American-made masks. I don't need your money. Don't need subsidies. Just tell people about the problem. And that was my problem with BARDA. Not my problem. BARDA wanted to do it. They weren't allowed to do it. This issue needed publicity. I tried to get them to talk to the Infection Control Prevention magazine, Infection Control Today, sorry. I wanted them to talk to the New York Times. Every time we had some kind of a flu bump, I wanted them to be able to talk, and they couldn't do it.
Well, thank you very much. Your testimony has certainly been very enlightening. I know the chairwoman and I were kind of looking at each other almost in disbelief, and I certainly think that this is something that Congress has to get involved with, and sooner the better. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Can I point out something?
Sure.
You know, I watched all of this in a room a little while ago, and it seemed like everybody who was beating up on Mr. Bright, Dr. Bright, was a Republican, and everybody who was defending him was a Democrat. I'm a Republican. I voted for President Trump. And I admire Dr. Bright. I don't know what he did in all of his other activities, but I think everything I've heard and every time I've talked to him and everything he said here made a lot of sense, and I believe him.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. I now have the pleasure of recognizing the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Guthrie, for his 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Appreciate you coming today. I have a manufacturing background myself, and I know that the president's asked General Motors and Ford to make ventilators, and everybody's business is their business. They make decisions based on what's right for their business. But during the pandemic, there is an upload, and if every business person says we're not going to adjust our lines for a pandemic, and understand Ford and GM have different access to capital than some others, just something that everybody needs to be concerned about, because in a pandemic you do have increased orders, but I understand you want some long-term guarantees as well. But there are a lot of people making decisions. There are people now with their businesses shut down because of what's going on in the pandemic. But I'm just trying to understand the mask manufacturer process, and so
If you can.
so my questions are, what type of masks do you manufacture, and do they represent the totality of mask variations sought by the Strategic National Stockpile? And if you can get all these questions in, do you make all masks that are in demand that other domestic product producers make?
The only mask that I don't make is a cone-style mask, the hard cone style. All the masks like you all are wearing, we make all of those, and we make N95 respirators, yes.
You do all the N95s?
Our factory used to make 87% of the U.S. mask supply.
So as you know, the Strategic National Stockpile procedure procures medical countermeasures and other supplies to be deployed in a public health agency.
Yes, sir.
I understand you worked with Dr. Bright at BARDA to get federal funding to produce masks. Did you have any conversations with Stephen Adams, the acting director of the Strategic National Stockpile?
let me go back before that. On the Strategic National Stockpile, I met with Greg Burrell face-to-face 5 or 6 years ago. And Greg Burrell had no problem whatsoever buying Chinese masks. And I had a conversation with him in the hallway after a meeting when I said, don't you find this a problem that America is dependent on Chinese masks? And he said, no, I don't. And as far as Mr. Adams, I believe I may have emailed him. I don't know, sir. The last 100 days, I've talked to so many people. I don't know what day it is most of the time.
So you thought it was necessary to go through Dr. Bright? You couldn't get anybody else to listen to? I mean, Dr. Bright.
Well, no. You got it all wrong. First of all, I wasn't looking for
I'm
business.
wrong. I'm just trying to find the information.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I wasn't looking for business. I opened my email. I don't need your business. My phones are ringing off the wall. I thought of BARDA, Dr. Robinson, Dr. Hatchett, and Dr. Bright. I thought of them as brothers in arms. I knew they couldn't buy my products. I knew that. But they were the only people who believed it. I would like everybody to go to YouTube, put in Michael Burgess and Prestige Ameritech. You'll see Mr. Burgess talking at our factory 10 years ago. You'll see him say that only 10% of the mask supply is made in the United States. I talked to Michael Burgess, Ron Wright, Joe Barton, Patrick Leahy, my associate Matt Conlon talked to Chuck Schumer. I wrote Barack Obama 20 letters, wrote President Trump and everybody in his early administration. Defense Secretary Mattis, General Jeffrey Clark, Nicole Lurie, Anita Patel with CDC, National Academies of Science, Greg Burrell, hundreds of hospitals, hospital purchasing groups, the Hospital Risk Managers Association. Hospital Risk Managers Association told them the mask supply was going to collapse. This is a risk. Nobody listened. Association of Operating Room Nurses, the Defense Department, the Veterans Department, Texas Governor Rick Perry, State Texas Rep Bill Zedler. By the way, Bill Zedler got it. Dozens of reporters. I've been on every news show. I've done this for 13 years. Nobody listened. And my conscience is clean, Mr. Guthrie. I've been working on this damn issue for 13 years, trying to save lives. Nobody listened, and now I'm not going to take any of this, what you're trying to do.
I'm not sure what I'm trying to do. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to find out about who you had talked with and move forward. So, well, the issue is that we do have to figure out what's strategic and where to move forward. And there is a lot of stuff, not just masks. A lot of stuff come from China. A lot of our pharmaceuticals and stuff moving forward. And that's something this committee needs to dig in to move forward and figure out what's moving forward. But I'm not sure what you were accusing me of trying to do. But I'll yell back. I apologize if I offended you. I didn't intend to.
The gentleman yields back. I think my colleagues will agree that my description of Mr. Bowen is that he's a force of nature. I mean, he has refused to give up since what year? 2006? You began your crusade?
2006.
2006. It's a pleasure to recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Matsui, for her 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for convening this hearing. And Mr. Boehm, thank you very much for being here today.
My pleasure.
Mr. Boehm, having been in the PPE business for over a decade, I understand you've worked with several administrations and BARDA directors in your efforts to secure the federal government's mask supply. Were you utilizing formal channels with BARDA, including Dr. Bright?
I'm not sure what your question is.
Well, were you going towards not only with Dr. Bright, but other people above him also at the same time?
No, I never spoke with anyone above the director.
Okay.
Well, actually, no, that's not true. I did correspond with Nicole Lurie one time.
Okay. All right. Well, while the facts are not completely known, whistleblower reporting indicates there might have been favoritism among administration officials regarding companies awarded supply production contracts. Mr. Bowen, I understand your company was eventually awarded a $9.5 million FEMA contract for the production of masks on April 7th.
Yes.
Okay. It was reported, I guess, in the Washington Post that a senior U.S. official said that the government did not have the money to take you up on your offer to help procure masks when you initially reached out in January, but the government ultimately awarded contracts to inexperienced manufacturers that charged as much as $5.50 apiece for masks, nearly 7 times the 79 cents per mask you offered. Given this, do you think it's fair to say that the government ultimately lost money by not partnering with Prestige to procure masks earlier? I think it's an easy question.
Well, yeah, my mask would have cost 79 cents.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. And I think even more important is that we would have had more masks earlier.
Yeah, but in their defense, again, it wasn't just like turning on a switch. This was a difficult process, and I think they had to look at it like, okay, it's going to take these guys 4 months to ramp up. Is it worth it? And it's an evolving situation. I don't want to hammer on. When I was talking to Mr. Navarro, he was acting in good faith. I was acting in good faith, and I wouldn't beat anybody up about that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bowen. I do still have serious concerns with the way this administration has assessed the risk and need for supplies. And I believe, Madam Chairwoman, that the committee should continue to investigate the administration's emergency purchasing processes. So we're procuring medical equipment and protective gear in the most efficient and transparent way possible. Now, we are preparing for a second wave of COVID-19 outbreaks that could coincide with the fall flu season. Mr. Bowen, from your perspective, and you've had experience in this, what gaps remain in the mask supply chain, and where should we be focusing our efforts now to ensure we're prepared to protect public health for the remainder of 2020?
Well, this is an unprecedented situation. There's no way anybody could have made enough masks to protect all of Americans' citizens. But we could have done a lot better we could have protected America's healthcare workers and patients. And that's where my world is. That's the products that we make, and that's what we've tried to do. And in this pandemic, for instance, we were making 75,000 respirators a month. That's not a lot, but we've been making them 10 years. We just couldn't get business because our products are made in America and they're more expensive. Now we're making 2 million, from 75,000 to 2 million. We're bringing on another 2 million, and these are machines that we've built. So, it's easy to look. I've seen a lot of people, and kind of like what he was saying, hey, you got 4 machines. What's up? Why are you not running those machines? We are not sitting on our hands, folks. We've gone from 1 shift to 3. We've gone from 80 people to 200. We're working our tail off and producing millions and millions of products. Setting those machines up is going to be difficult and expensive, and it requires a long-term commitment from a partner, not somebody who can just say, hey, do this. Because, look, we're a small business. And again, I'm not 3M. And if we do this, my partner and I euphemistically call it a suicide mission. Yeah, okay, let's go. Let's hire 100 people and order truckloads of material, and then somebody says pandemic's over, and we're stuck with it again. We don't want to do that. So we're not mercenary. Like I said, my conscience couldn't be any cleaner. I've been telling this message forever. So for somebody to say you could have done better, I'm offended by that.
No, I'm not saying that at all. So thank you very much, Ms. Bowen, for coming before us. And you brought a lot of things to our attention that I think are necessary. So thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. My pleasure to be here.
The gentlewoman yields back. Pleasure to recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, for his 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I represent that line of Virginia down there on the south side, right next to North Carolina, and a lot of our folks had experience in the industry, in the textile industry before both Mexico and China did the same thing that they've done to you, and they've ramped up and they're making all kinds of masks and so forth, and their concern is if we ramp up, will there be something down the road where we buy made in America? And I agree with you on that. We need to figure out a way to do that, not only on masks and PPE, but on drug supply, et cetera. We need to make sure a significant portion of that's made in the United States so we don't find ourselves in this situation again. That being said, your phone's ringing off a hook, and I think maybe you've already answered this, but if you could briefly just state why, if your phone's ringing off a hook, why you need to have a guarantee on the other end, knowing that the policy is going to shift, but we may not be able to give you a contract in advance.
Well, for me to hire the people and build the machines, I can't do that for a temporary need.
So you don't
What I'm
have the
doing
machines built right now?
No, I mean, I'm saying to go more than we've already gone, which we've already built as much as we can risk.
Okay, but you said you had 4 lines sitting empty. So I thought the machines were already there. Is that not accurate?
Yeah. Please ask your question again. I'm confused.
Okay, just trying to figure out, understanding that somehow the policy is going to change, but
Yeah.
we can't guarantee you a contract, but I think everybody agrees we've got to have more made in America.
Right.
Why not ramp up with the understanding that the policy is likely to change? And I think it will change, because I think we don't, whether it be masks or other PPE or drug supply, we're going to have a significant portion of these items made in the United States going forward.
Yeah.
Knowing that, and your phone's ringing off a hook, why not ramp up those 4 lines?
Because one day the pandemic's going to end, and the usage will go down to the basement again where it was. There'll be 10 times less usage, and I'll have all these machines and people and materials and have nothing to do with them. That's what happened to us before. This is a very difficult thing to ramp up.
All right.
So, and let me
I
say
do
this
think-
again, let me remind you that we have ramped up. We've gone from making 75,000 respirators a month to about in 40 days, we'll be ramped up to making 4 million respirators per month. So don't concentrate on these 4 Chinese machines that we really don't know much about and would be a total pain to get going. On top of, I'm trying not to kill my business partner who is in charge of getting all this stuff done. He's working 20 hours a day now with all the projects we've already got. Now to dump this on top for some business that may or may not come, absolutely not.
Well, I would say to you that I believe, and I think that the folks in my district who are doing it, and there's 4 or 5 companies that have retooled and gone back up, not to your size, but
They're making
I think,
things that look like masks.
And,
They're not making masks. They're making things
one of these
that look
companies
like
used to make masks before they got run out of the industry. That being said, I believe that Americans are going to be wearing masks a lot more at various places, movie theaters, and so forth. I don't think the number is going to go back down. All right. In your testimony, you stated that in 2009, you were instructed by then BARDA Director Brenda Hayden to ramp up mask production to respond to H1N1 pandemic. Did you have a contract with the Department of HHS to produce masks at that time? And if not, why not?
No, we didn't. And
Okay. After H1N1, did you continue to produce masks for purposes of restocking the strategic national stockpile?
I can't do that without the strategic national stockpile wanting to buy them.
Did you have conversations with BARDA, SNS, and HHS at that time about supplying the masks for the national stockpile?
I have talked to Greg Burrell on many occasions, sir, and I've also offered those machines to him. And I've offered those machines to the Department of Defense.
You're just going to
And
give
I've
them the
said,
machines, or you're
yeah,
going to give them the production?
No, listen to this. Here's what I wanted to do. I wanted CDC and VA and DOD to get together. I had 4 machines. I had very little money in that could make a whole bunch of masks. And for years, and I got 13 years worth of emails. I can document all of this stuff. I said to the CDC, hey, we can fix, we can make sure that the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration always has masks. I got these 4 machines sitting here doing nothing.
You were willing to give them the production, but not the machines.
No, well, let me finish.
Just try and sort it out.
Well, here's what I was going to say. Let's use 1 machine. It'll make your whole annual usage for 1 machine. And we'll let 3 of them sit there in our factory, just ready to go. And when you need them, we can turn those things on. And I couldn't get anybody interested in it.
Are we going to give them to them or lease them?
Didn't matter. I didn't have any money in them. I said, give me your peacetime military hospital business, and we'll give you these machines. They'll just sit there. Now, we would have had to have some kind of a plan, to get materials and things like that. But I was basically saying, we've got a warm base operation, and it's not going to cost you guys anything. I made that offer to several agencies.
I see my time is up. I yield back, Madam Chair.
And by the way, forgive me for being angry. I'm angry because I've done this for so long. And I've been ignored for so long. And I apologize.
Well, Mr. Bowen, I don't think you need to apologize. At least that's my view. I think shame on us. I think shame on all of us that we've allowed this to happen. And this is powerful testimony. It underscores what we need to do, the position that we're in, our crippling dependence on foreign countries for what is, we all realize now with this pandemic, what has been laid bare.
I totally...
So your testimony is, I think, some of the most important testimony that Congress could be hearing. I now have the pleasure of recognizing the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Castor, for her 5 minutes of questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bowen. I think you heard Dr. Bright as well this morning say that the inaction has cost us lives. And I relayed some of what I understand is that you were first contacted by the Department of Homeland Security in January because they wanted masks for airport screeners. Is that correct?
Yes, and let me clarify. That was probably a low-level purchasing person looking for products. And, you know, a lot was going on, and I'm trying to figure out if this is real. And so they were asking for masks, and I said, I can't help you. But I said, just tell me as two Americans over the back fence, are you worried about this? And he said, I'm really worried about it.
So that flipped a light switch for you in January.
That and a lot of other things. At the end of January, my phone started exploding, and it was really weird. It was Chinese Americans calling to buy masks, and they were sending them home. So, by the way, the reports that I was sending masks to China is inaccurate. I was sending masks to Americans who were sending masks to China.
And then I understand that you began emailing with Dr. Bright. Was it January 26th? You emailed Dr. Bright and said that here in America, our mask supply is an imminent risk.
Yeah, but again, as I said in my opening statement, those emails were just the latest of 13 years of emails to the directors of BARDA. I considered them my only allies. I couldn't get anybody else in the government to understand the issue. They understood it. So anytime something would happen, we get a flu or the MERS comes out in the Middle East or whatever, I'd send them an email, hey, is this a big one? Should I ramp up?
And then Dr. Bright, as we know, as he testified, he elevated your concern and sent it to Dr. Robert Cadlack, the HHS Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Emergency Response. Did you hear at that point from Dr. Cadlack?
No, I've never met him before, or never talked to him before.
And do I understand from the accounts you've previously provided, you did not hear back really until a month later when you received a form letter from FDA?
I don't relate those two events, and the timing, I would have to go back and look at emails. But the form letter from FDA, I don't think had anything to do with those other things. I think that was separate.
Well, here's the frustration that I have. This continues to be a problem. After you sent that original notice email and Dr. Bright elevated it to our Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Emergency Response at the end of January, it's February, March, April, May, and what I heard from my hospitals just today and yesterday, N95s are still very difficult to procure. They're in dire need for N95s. My community health center, we continue to struggle to get N95s. And there are so many folks trying to sell knockoffs. And one of our largest health systems says the supply chain remains inconsistent and irregular. They remain concerned as they head into the fall that N95 masks are they're gonna be squeezed because of flu season and the coronavirus. I mean, why haven't we been able to get a handle on that? I know that they have issued contracts, and what do you have to say? There was a contract apparently issued for $55 million to a company with no history of procuring medical equipment for a cost of $5.50 a piece. What do you know about that?
Just what I read in the paper. Nothing more than you do.
What do we say to my hospitals, my nurses, my doctors, the EMTs on the front line right now, that it's months later and they still are struggling with the supply chain and they're worried, and we have nurses dying who go in to save a COVID patient who stopped breathing. And that in the Detroit area, they have 700 staff members in one health system, and dozens have died. What do you?
I say that we, as a country, and as the people who are supposed to be on top of this stuff, messed up. And it's not what happened in January. It's what's happened since 2007. Actually, since 2004, you know. Presidential Directive 21 by George Bush identified this as a problem in 2007. I've been on CNN and Lou Dobbs and Neil Cavuto and ad infinitum for all this time.
But is there not something a little more insidious here when you have an administration that downplayed it and said it was going to disappear and didn't follow the scientist and told Dr. Bright instead of, we respect you and we hear you, in fact, we're going to can you and we're going to reassign you and we're going to bury you because you're speaking truth to power? Isn't that a little bit different right now?
Now that you ask, again, I'm a Republican, been a lifelong Republican, and I'm embarrassed by how that's been handled. Like Rick Bright said, it's the scientists we need to be listening to, and we're not. That has got to change, or more lives are going to be lost.
Thank you.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. It's a pleasure to recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilirakis.
Thank you.
For your 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Bowen, for testifying or presenting today. Considering the Made in China 2025 initiative, can you describe how China is working to corner the personal protective equipment, the PPE market? If you can't, I understand, but if you can, it would be very informative.
America has a weakness for low prices. And I think Chinese prices are so low. A few years ago, I decided to go buy 12 things from Lowe's Home Improvement Center. And I decided I was going to pay whatever it took to buy American. I couldn't make that decision. That decision was taken away from me. I bought one item. It was a plunger. A toilet plunger was the only thing I could find that was made in America. And it's what it is. It's the people like the Lowe's and the Home Depot and the Walmarts and the medical companies that the way they want to make money is to lower their costs. The way they lower their costs is to go to China. The line is long and wide for people going to China. And that's why we're dependent on them for everything. I mean, go and look in your closet. Look at your tools. Look at everything. It's all from China. And the stuff that's in Mexico, let me say this, half of the U.S. mask supply is in Mexico. It's got reservations to go to China. Mexico's not cheap enough. And hospitals are cash-strapped, and they're bidding out things. If this hadn't happened, Mexico would have lost the business, and they'd have gone, China would have, in 5 years, China would have made all masks and respirators, like they do the gowns.
Thank you. What safeguards does the U.S. have against substandard PPE infiltrating critical industries like the medical industry, which they have? What standards do we have? What safeguards do we have in protecting our constituents?
Well, that's not a question I can answer. That's up to the FDA and NIOSH.
I understand. Okay. In addition to reports of substandard Chinese masks infiltrating markets like Canada and the price gouging that's going on, even here in the United States, I've also seen discontinued masks for sale on e-commerce sites here in the U.S., along with fake websites and email addresses utilizing American brand names. How is Prestige Ameritech working to crack down on potential counterfeiting and price gouging of its products? Of your products, in other words? How are you protecting yourself, your business?
We're a small company.
Yeah.
We're a family company. We don't have people to do that. We never had to worry about that before. Nobody cared about our products. My phone never rang. And now I'm working with the FBI on a daily basis because myself and my business partner have been impersonated. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
So that happens frequently, obviously.
our
the
website,
impersonating.
yes, our website has been copied. Our images have been copied. And I can tell you
Continue to
this.
elaborate on that, please.
Well, here's how it goes. I'll get an email from someone. I got an email from the CEO of a company in Dallas last month that said, I'm about to wire you $1.6 million. I just got a feeling. I want to make sure you're for real. I said, that's not me. And someone in India copied our entire website. And what they're trying to do is use our good reputation and our worldwide press coverage now, and they're saying, hey, we're with Prestige Ameritech. We're offering you hundreds of millions of masks and wire money to this account. They even have Texas phone numbers. So anybody watching this who is being offered a lot of Prestige Ameritech masks, don't do it.
Okay, give us some advice. How might Congress further support efforts to protect consumers from price gouging and counterfeit goods? What would you recommend? Do you have any advice for us? With regard to
no.
legislation, ideas, what do you think?
No, actually, that's something I haven't thought about. If you gave me a couple of days, I could think about it.
Okay, well, yeah, if you could get that information to us, we'd appreciate it very much.
I probably won't remember it after this. If somebody could
All right, well,
send me a letter, it'd be great.
Madam Chair, maybe we can communicate with him. Thank you very much, sir.
It's my pleasure, sir.
The gentleman yields back. Every member will have the opportunity to submit questions to our witnesses, so you will have those questions, Mr. Bowen, and as timely as possible, then you can respond to the gentleman's question and anyone else that submits one to you.
I'd be
Okay?
happy to.
All right. Now I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Sarbanes, for his 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bowen. You don't know me, but I feel like I know you because when I listen to you talk, I think about a lot of people in my district, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, who scratch their head a lot of the time and wonder why we can't get these things fixed, why we can't do simple stuff, why we can't get from point A to point B. And I would say to you that I think your composure today has been remarkable, given the fight you've been waging for 15 years. In ancient mythology, there's a character called Cassandra. Cassandra had the ability to see into the future, but was cursed by Apollo that no one would ever believe her prophecy. And sitting here listening to you today, that's immediately what I thought of. And so thank you for maintaining composure at a time when you could literally, without apology, stand on that desk and just scream at the top of your lungs, I told you so, over and over and over and over again. This is a report from 2007. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, discussion with respirator protection device manufacturers on preparedness and surge capacity. First page is the bottom line. I'm just going to read some of these things. 2007. There will be a significant increase in the need for respiratory protection devices, RPD, during an influenza pandemic. There will be significant needs across all sectors: healthcare, public safety, business, government, public. Industrial surge capacity of RPD will not be able to meet need, and supplies will be short during a pandemic. There are several RPD options. I'm sure you probably described some of them that can be employed to meet the projected needs. All sectors must contribute to efforts to prepare in order to meet the needs for RPD or find safe ways to work around limited supplies during a pandemic. So this is 2007. This is when you were starting on your crusade. Well-founded, obviously, given what the department was identifying as needs at that time. And here we are, 13 years later, in the midst of a pandemic that you and others cautioned us about, and we're not ready. And I have to say that I'm embarrassed on behalf of the government's failure to respond to these warnings for so many years. I actually was elected in 2006 and came here in 2007. So my time here kind of tracks your journey to try to get us to wake up to this pandemic, to get things to be made again here in America. And I've been an advocate for those things, but not enough of an advocate, I confess, given what you're saying. So I apologize on behalf of the U.S. government that we have not responded better to the warnings that you've given us for so many years. And now we're paying for it. And the cost is lives, unfortunately. So shame on us. And 10 years from now, they'll play back the video of this hearing, and will we mark this as the beginning of getting with the program finally and actually changing our policy and beginning to make things here, protecting our national security, as you say, and that is absolutely the right frame in this moment and in the midst of this crisis. Shame on us if we don't learn from this. And I'm sure people said it before, policymakers behind microphones, and here we are. So I hope the public measures our commitment to change on this and to stand up what America needs to do to anticipate these things in the future. I've almost run out of time, but let me ask you a question. Do you think we can do it? Do you believe that if we put our minds to it, that if we collaborate, the private sector and government, to create these manufacturing supply chains, to bring this back from offshore, that we can do what we need to do to keep our people safe? Do you believe that?
I can give you a confident yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because I'm being contacted by a lot of the healthcare organizations that didn't listen. And they are coming to me and saying, you were right, let's fix this.
Well, let's fix it. Thank you for being here today. I yield back.
My pleasure.
The gentleman yields back. I want the gentleman to know that I especially appreciate your Greek oratorical skills.
Oh, by the way, I'd like to say that I didn't know about Cassandra until just recently and was told about that myth by Marin McKenna. She's the author of Superbug, and she's been one of my sisters in arms on this, and she told me about Cassandra. So,
Okay.
All right, it's a pleasure to recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Long, for his 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And thank you, Mr. Bowen, for being here today. Earlier, I was a little confused. Someone asked you about what type of mask you make, and I thought you said you did not make the hard mask, that you make more of the mask like we're wearing today when we're not on a microphone. Your FEMA contract for $9 million, was that not an N95 mask contract?
yes, that's an N95, but it is a flat mask, not a cone mask.
Okay.
It's
okay.
more of a pocket-style mask.
Okay, well, that's fine. I just want some clarification there.
Yeah.
How are those packaged, roughly? I mean, how many are in a box or whatever when you ship them out to FEMA and they ship them to our states?
Ours are packaged 50 per box and 6 boxes per case.
Okay.
300 per case.
We have been fighting this battle to get more N95 masks for our states, and fighting back and forth between states and getting them from FEMA. So if our state received N95s from FEMA within the last 20 days, let's say, would those have been your masks?
Well, I think they have contracts with multiple people, so they could have been my mask, but not necessarily.
Okay. Have you heard any complaint about the boxes that FEMA's shipping arriving with missing masks, sometimes over half the box and filled with filler material? Have you been approached about that?
No, in fact, quite the opposite. We're having hospitals, Baylor, for instance, in Dallas, got some masks from FEMA of ours, and they liked them so much they want to start buying them. So we're actually hearing the opposite of that. That's probably...
Well, no. I'm not accusing you of shipping out half-filled boxes,
Yeah.
but the state of Missouri, that's what we're receiving from FEMA.
It's probably...
Boxes that have obviously been cracked open somewhere else, masks removed, and
Are they
fillers.
Prestige Ameritech masks? Or you're asking me, so you don't know, right?
I texted the governor here a minute ago, but he didn't. It just came to me when you were talking about what mask you make a while ago, so I'm waiting for an answer from the governor's chief of staff. But I don't, if that's an ongoing problem with other states or if you've heard anything about it, but we're just trying to get to the bottom of these masks that FEMA ships out boxes, and you open them up and there's a bunch of filler material and half the mask or 3/4 are gone.
That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't?
Yeah, we ship full cases to FEMA, and we're not in the habit of putting fillers in our boxes.
No, I'm sure your
Oh,
company,
no.
don't get me wrong,
I
but I
understand that, but I'm just saying, if that's happening, it's probably from somewhere else or...
well, that's what we need to find out where that
Yeah.
somewhere else is.
Well, and remember, I'm only selling them $1 million a month. They're getting lots and lots, millions and millions from
We're
other
thankful
people.
for anything we get in Missouri. Trust me, we tried for a long time to get a hold of them.
I have a little bitty contract.
One of the two largest hospitals in my district ordered masks, and I'm sure they were N95s they ordered. They paid 8 times what was the going rate pre-corona outbreak. Mm-hmm. They got their N95 mask in great shape. Everything was fine. The boxes were full, and they were counterfeit. So that's one of the reasons for this hearing here today, trying to sort out some of these things and figure out, like you say, if people are stealing your website, it's obvious, I guess, where some of the counterfeit masks at 8 times the going rate are coming from. I got a little off subject there. Let me ask you my question here before I get too far out there on a limb. But it's my understanding that you were able to get connected with the White House economic advisor, Peter Navarro, in March.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess it was March, yeah.
That's correct, okay.
Yeah.
NBC News reported that after you connected with Peter Navarro, that Dr. Bright wrote to his deputy asking him to explore whether BARDA could divert money that was expressly reserved for vaccines and other biodefense measures to buy masks.
Okay.
According to NBC News, this was an example of how Trump and his top aides have played favorites in awarding contracts and allocating scarce resources. Your company, Prestige Ameritech's deal with FEMA is one of only 2 identified in the history of the federal contracting database that explicitly says it was directed by the White House. My question, what is your response to these allegations from NBC? I'm only asking since Dr. Bright's whistleblower allegations accuse others at the Department of Health and Human Services of cronyism.
I'm really glad you brought that up because NBC that article was only one article of 2 that were critical about us, and both of those articles were written by people who didn't talk to me and got the article wrong. If you'd like, I can tell you how that all came about.
Certainly.
Okay? I was on either NPR or BBC, and one of Steve Bannon's producers heard me on the show and asked me to be on their show. And they called me, and one of their producer guys named George called and said, hey, would you be on Steve Bannon's show? And I don't know a lot about Steve Bannon, but I know he's a lot farther to the right than I am. And I said, well, in all fairness, I need to tell you, I'm not a Trump supporter. And he said, I don't care. So I just want to get that out of the, I said, I want to be on this show if they think I'm a Trump supporter. And he said, no, I don't care. So then the show went real well. And I was invited back. And I enjoyed talking to Steve Bannon. It was fun. And Steve got it. He got the cause. And he said, I'm going to tell a friend of mine, Dr. Hatfield and Dr. Navarro, about you guys. And I said, who's Dr. Navarro? And he told me, and I said, great, okay. So then, somebody from Dr. Navarro's office called me, and I went through the same spiel. Now you think I'm a nut, but that's just the way I am. I want to make sure everybody knows everything, and so somebody from Dr. Navarro's office called and asked me about my company and everything. I said, yeah, I make masks. I said, but again, in all fairness, I need to tell you, I am not a Trump supporter. In fact, I did an article in the Dallas Morning News 2 years ago that was very critical, and that's going to come out. And he said, I don't care. So, and then to make matters, to beat a dead horse, when Dr. Navarro called me, I did the same thing. I said, hey, just FYI, you give me a contract, this article's going to come out, and it might embarrass you, just let you know. And he laughed. Dr. Navarro laughed at me, and he said, send me the article. And I did. So I've told my friends recently, that article should have been titled, Trump Administration Gives Mask Contract to Biden Supporter. That's the real deal.
Okay.
So it was not cronyism, sir.
Do what?
And it was not cronyism at all. And let me tell you, too, Peter Navarro was a gentleman, acted in good faith. He was concerned about the mask supply. So was I, and that's what we talked about.
I think the team.
No cronyism. And by the way, if you want to take that FEMA contract away from me, please do. I can make a lot more money selling those masks somewhere else. I got a pure heart, sir. I really do.
But I think Trump's advisors and close people, you see him at the press conference out there.
Yeah.
Several of those people are not Trump supporters either,
Yeah.
but the president has picked them because they're the best in the business, which I think that's good.
Well,
yield back.
that was the farthest from Coney. I pretty much tried to talk myself out of that. That's probably why Mr. Navarro said I was difficult to work with. I don't know.
The gentleman's time has expired. Pleasure to recognize the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan, for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bowen, thank you so much for being with us today, sir. As you outlined in your testimony, you have been raising the alarm about the national security risk from the loss of domestic mass production for some time. Does the United States need to change that and dramatically increase the manufacturing of medical supplies?
There's a short-term issue and a long-term issue. Right now, there's a lot of masks that are needed, and there are a lot of people going into the business. Unfortunately, a lot of them don't know what they're doing, and we're making masks out of fabric and other things that don't work. What I call it is making a life jacket out of lead. You know, I can make a life jacket out of lead and I can paint it orange, but don't go in the pool. Some of these masks that are being made are worthless. I'm sorry, I lost it.
I think you answered the question that, yes, the United States needs to take this seriously and to up manufacturing, but we need to do it the right way.
Yeah, I don't think we need to up manufacturing that much. I just think we need to have it be in the United States so it can't get cut off. Like a lot of the Chinese supply was cut off.
Appreciate that, sir. On January 22nd, you emailed officials at HHS and offered to reactivate 4 of your company's unused production lines for N95 respirators, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what was the response to your offer?
Well, Dr. Bright was kind of all over it. I mean, he really thought this was an important thing. So he said, I'm going to forward you to Laura Wolf. She's in charge of infrastructure. And my attitude was, this is too little too late, but we've got these 4 machines. We could at least, protect some people, maybe our infrastructure. So they asked me to get with her and tell her what we could do. So I did. I sent a big long email that said, here's what we can do. And then there wasn't a lot of response after that. And again, I wasn't looking for a contract. I'm just trying to be helpful at this point. So, and again, I think that the travesty here isn't what happened in January and that time. Laura Wolf is no more responsible than all these other thousands of people that I told, hospitals and everybody I told. So to look at her and go, or look at them and go, hey, they didn't listen and you were right, well, I might not have been right. They're all making decisions in a battlefield situation. I'm not going to be too hard on those folks. I think that the real issue is that, look at the HHS presentation from 13 years ago. They said, here it is, we're going to have a problem. And that day, that's why I said when Brenda Hayden came and gave us that presentation, Brenda, you're preaching to the choir. We can't believe this. This is so wonderful. And then Brenda goes, but we're not allowed to fix it. I said, you've got to be kidding. So that's why I latched on to BARDA, because they were the only people who believed it. And I kept thinking, and I'll tell you how bad it was and how the responsibility of this goes far and wide, is all three of those directors believed it and knew that it was going to happen, and they tried to work with me. Dr. Robinson got on a plane and went and talked to a hospital group in Houston because I asked him to. And because of that, MD Anderson Cancer Center today has enough masks, and they're the only hospital system in in Houston who does, because Dr.
Bowen,
Robinson got on a plane.
Just because my time's going to run out here, sir, in that communication, it's my understanding that you shared how many masks you could make, and what I was led to believe was 1.7 million masks per week or 7 million per month. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct. If we ran 24/7, yes.
And the price you offered was 79 cents, I think I heard you say earlier?
Well, back then, there was no talk of price. I just said these machines are available. And again, I wasn't looking for a contract. I just said, this is here. Remember this? This is here. Don't forget.
Earlier in the testimony, though, I think you said the price was 79 cents for some of the...
Since then, we have priced them at 79 cents. Yes,
I appreciate that, sir. And when the government finally acted on the need for masks and entered into contracts with less experienced manufacturers, they ended up paying as much as $5.50 per mask. Is that correct?
I just know what I read in the paper.
I read that as well. It sounds like price gouging to me. Look, Dr. Bright testified that there's still a shortage of PPE. There should be no question to everyone in this hearing that there's a shortage of PPE, including masks. Now, instead of the Trump administration accepting responsibility and ensuring critical PPE was manufactured at the level needed and coordinating with states to distribute PPE where it's needed, the administration left states bidding against one another. Jared Kushner, who was appointed by the president to be in charge of medical supplies, said at a press conference, quote, the notion of the federal stockpile was it's supposed to be our stockpile, it's not supposed to be the state stockpiles that they then use. A day after Jared Kushner was on that press conference, the website was changed to reflect his remarks. And Madam Chair, I just want to submit into the record an article from U.S. News and World Report, States Competing in Global Jungle for PPE.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yield back. The gentleman yields back. Pleasure to recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Dr. Bouchon, for his 5 minutes of questions.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for being here. So it's just you and 3M that makes these type of masks in the U.S., pretty much?
No.
I mean, predating the pandemic. So,
Predating the pandemic.
I mean, there's not much U.S. competition.
Well,
not much U.S.
Well, I formed
on a large scale, that's what I'm saying.
Not on a large scale. Yeah. No, we're all small. The members of the Secure Mask Supply Association that I started in 2014, there's 4 of us and then a few others, small, but we make probably less than 10% of the supply.
Okay. I mean, this has been a long-standing issue. I mean, your testimony has shown us that. Comments from members have shown us that. And honestly, it's an issue that should have been addressed probably in Congress. I mean, you know, Congress can tell agencies what to do and how to act. And, you know, government contracting rules, agency rules and regulations. I mean, this is my 10th year in Congress, and it's always amazed me about how not very prescriptive we are in Congress. It's more broad on what we say. I mean, the recent stuff that we've done is an example. For the most part, it's turned out okay, but we do give agencies a lot of leeway to set rules, regulations, and other things. And it's clear you've interacted with these agencies for years, and even though maybe we knew up here and talked about it that we had to fix this problem, it was really never fixed unless Congress tells them to do it. They're probably not going to. You know, the other thing is the private sector marketplace. I know you talked about that, how hospitals get products from, you know, buy cheaper products that are not made in the United States. For your products, say for an N95 net mask, the FDA has to approve those products to be used in the United States?
Yes, sir. Well, I think just now, I think that has changed. I believe it's just NIOSH for N95s, okay.
But there is a federal agency that has to certify this is something we.
Yes, sir.
Right. So, you know, So, I mean, we do have some control over what, in certain respect, about the quality of the masks that we import into the United States. Clearly, there's been, some counterfeits, but probably also some products brought from China and other places that maybe don't go through, did they go through the same certification process that you do?
Well, they're supposed to, but I know, for instance, every once in a while, a Chinese respirator. Well, let me say what NIOSH will do. They'll take masks out of the market.
Yeah.
They'll go buy masks and test them.
Yeah.
If they fail, you can lose your
Okay.
registration.
And they do that for the Chinese-made masks too, right?
So the Chinese mask, a lot of those have gotten
Yeah.
lost their registration.
Yeah, okay. And for the national stockpile, I mean, it seems to me that we're going to have to really consider changing how we deal with that. I mean, you have a stockpile of something, you buy all of this stuff, and then it outdates, right? And then you
Right.
buy it all again.
Right.
So what's the outdate on say just an N95 mask? How long are those certified to be used and sitting on a shelf? You pull it off there.
They're all different.
For how long?
They're all different. 5, 10, 15 years, they're all
different.
They're all different, but I've never thought that stockpiling was the way to go.
Right, so this mask here might be, if it's sat on a shelf in a closed box, it might say on there 10 years,
It might be fine.
or it might be 5, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
So-
or the elastic could rot. And
Which
then it
has
just-
happened, by the way. I've had people at hospitals tell me they've pulled masks off the shelf and the elastics popped when they tried to put it on.
I don't think stockpiling is the.
So what do you think we should do then? I mean, should we,
Well-
for example, in the stockpile, if they were outdated, start to outdate, should we be able to sell that stuff before it outdates? I mean, what would be the length of time before an outdate that you'd feel comfortable selling a product?
I don't believe in stockpiling, sir, because of all the problems that we've already identified.
Okay.
I think what we should do is come up with a new kind of mask that can be made extremely fast. Talking about hundreds of millions a week.
So some innovative stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
And then ramp up. I presented a program or an idea called HyperSurge to CDC several years ago, and that's what I said. And they said it was the best presentation of the meeting.
Yeah.
And then we never did it because I couldn't figure out a way to make it profitable to go and build a machine that's not going to be used. I'm not in that business.
Yeah, so I get that, because like I was a heart surgeon before, and so we used to, when I first started 25 years ago, we would have a stockpile of heart valves of all sizes.
Right.
The hospital bought them, they sat there, they had outdates on them, and over the years, ultimately, we got to a point where they don't stockpile those anymore at the hospital because things would outdate and they'd have to get rid of them. So now, basically, things rotate. When you're going to do a heart surgery case,
Right.
you can get the products will come through and you'll be it's consignment basically, right? You don't buy them anymore, so that's kind of what you're saying as a stockpile. You don't stockpile this stuff, but you have a way of quickly getting things.
Well, and a stockpile will work in some situations. For instance, the government does buy masks. The VA and the DOD buy millions of masks.
Right.
So that can rotate through. So they need a coherent plan, and that's what I tried to present. I said, we've got these 4 machines. Let's use one machine for your peacetime use. We'll rotate that stock for you. Yeah, that was the plan.
I'm just saying that the U.S. government could help create a consistent marketplace for U.S.-made masks.
Yes. Okay.
We could be part of the solution.
It can be done for healthcare workers. To do it for the whole United States for something that happens every 100 years to protect all of Americans is probably not practical.
Understood.
But protecting America's healthcare workers is absolutely possible.
Fair enough. All right, I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Schrader, for his 5 minutes of questions.
Hi, Mr. Bowen. Welcome. We're doing a lot of things these days aren't real practical, but we're being forced into them.
It's just, it's surreal.
Yeah. To some of the communications with Dr. Bright, one of the references he made was to a Department of Homeland Security request or communication with you back in mid-January to procure some masks. And could you talk about that just a little bit? What was the nature of that?
Yeah, what I would classify as some sort of a purchasing agent kind of a person, not a high-ranking official, called and said they were looking for masks, I believe for their screeners. And I said, I don't have any, we're sold out. And then I just asked him, what do you think? Is this real? And I said, give me your honest opinion. And he said, I think it's going to be bad. And I said, yeah, I do too. So to pick up the phone and call Rick Bright, again, these folks to me were brothers in arms. I called them for 15 years, 13 years. And every time something like this would happen, I'd pick up the phone and go, hey, is this it? Is this the big one? Can I help you? Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that while HHS was not receiving this information in a productive manner, DHS, at least some folks in DHS were very aware, kind of a situation.
I don't know, but we were never able to sell the government masks. The government was never a customer of ours until the H1N1 pandemic, and they bought masks from us in emergency, and then never bought again. And tragically,
well, I'd like to, just as, if I may, I'd like to get at that in a
Go
minute.
ahead.
But before we do, on February 3rd, there was communication with you and Dr. Wolf.
Laura Wolf?
Yep. And a comment was made, I think, and Dr. Bright referred to this, that if we weren't responding now, that our masks would forever be under foreign control. Do you remember that comment?
I don't know,
Okay.
but I
was curious what you meant by.
I said that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What I meant was, I'm glad you asked that question. What I meant was, if we don't fix the U.S. mask supply now, while everybody's thinking about it, while people are dying, we're going to do exactly what we did after H1N1. During H1N1, I'm on the news just like now, and we thought, it's over. We've finally been vindicated. We couldn't believe it when everything went right back. And it's worse. Things are worse now than they were before H1N1.
So getting back to your earlier comments and a bit of what Dr. Bashan was talking about, we pretty clear we need to make some of this stuff in America. The question is, I have a little tiny veterinary practice, or had a very small veterinary practice, and we use masks. The question, but I was always worried about the dollar, and my job here is also to protect the taxpayer dollar. Mm-hmm. And $5 a box, $1 a box, you got to think about it at least a little bit. So what's the right mix there? How do we protect this taxpayer dollar, but make sure we protect Made in America so that we can react to these
What I'm
crises?
going to say is going to make no accounting sense. What I'm going to say is that dollar is not real. It should be ignored. They're not making a profit. Just because some country can sell a mask and lose money on it to us, does that mean we ought to buy that and think that's viable? It's not. It's not. We ought to buy everything that has to do with a critical product like a mask in the United States. Masks cost less now. My masks cost less now than masks cost 30 years ago. You can buy 2 Class II medical devices, which are called surgical masks, for less than a gumball. Okay, the fact that China can make them for 2 cents or sell them for 2 cents, let's ignore that. It's not real, and it's a threat to national security.
So last question, if I may, is, and you've alluded to this again, it'd be nice to have a stockpile, but stockpile is not the total answer for what you and Larry were just talking about. What role does the federal government have in setting up maybe a platform that businesses could use when times are tough? In other words, it's not worth your while to set up this platform, produce it for a couple of months, and then try and shut this down, unemploy 100 people. What role does could the federal government have? Well, we face this with drugs. The chairwoman has been very adamant and concerned about all our active ingredients are made in China, or India. That's not a healthy situation either, especially right now. So what is the role, what's the public-private partnership with you guys to stand up a platform that could be activated, and we bear some of the cost and you guys can tool right up?
Start by tearing down the silos between the CDC and VA and DOD and BARDA and HHS. Get all of those people in a room, because the VA and the DOD use millions and millions of masks, so that can rotate a stockpile. That can justify having machines sitting here ready to be used. There needs to be a coordinated plan between all of these organizations, and then there needs to be, again, the government needs, and the government can't tell hospitals to buy American-made masks, but they can sure put them on notice that if you don't, you're probably going to get sued at some point. I laughed. I told my wife the other day. I said, I'm probably going to spend the last 10 years of my career being a paid witness, because I think all these people who can't protect their employees are going to say, hey, why'd you do this to us? You know? And let me say one more thing, too. I've dealt with this thing for so long, and it's been so illogical, and I've tried to figure it out. And who's at fault? Who's at fault? And so people ask me that. Who's to blame? And I got to the point where it's human nature. It's all of us. I couldn't convince doctors. I couldn't. Listen to this. I had 3 directors of BARDA said that, Mike, if you get somebody to call me, I will verify that what you're saying is true. I'll tell them it was true. Mr. Schrader, I couldn't get them to call. I couldn't get hospitals to make that call. I don't think they wanted to hear it. They're programmed to save money. They're not programmed to say, I want to make sure my masks are going to be here. It didn't compute. I was speaking Greek to everyone. So to look at this story and look back and blame everybody, I'm not even going to do that. I'm looking at this pandemic. There's a silver lining. The silver lining is it's told everybody there's a big problem, and we can fix this problem and never go through this again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. A pleasure to recognize the gentlewoman from Indiana, Ms. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Mr. Bowen, for being here. It's so interesting to hear, and I want to thank you actually for not blaming and trying to educate all of us as to what you have been telling America and government officials for a very, very long time. In fact, the chairwoman and I have been a part of, and I entered into the record a few hearings ago, a group called CSIS, Strengthening America's Public Health Security. And the title of this big report that a bunch of professionals came together, a bunch of medical professionals came together, the title of the report is Ending the Cycle of Crisis and Complacency in U.S. Global Health Security. It was led by Julie Gerberding, who'd been a health official. It was led by Senator Kelly Ayotte, who'd been in the U.S. Senate. It was all focused on, and it came out in November of 19. It came out in November of 19, and it had a lot of great recommendations that I hope, once again, because I talked about it before, in early 2020, we always go into the cycle of dealing with something, then we become complacent, and we lose focus once again. And we have done it, you have said, since 9/11. President George W. Bush had a focus on it, tried to bring attention to the mask problem and others, and then we lost it during the Obama administration, and you wrote lots of letters, and we didn't ramp up. But I have to tell you that during all of that time participating in that commission, we talked about therapeutics, we talked about vaccines, we talked about diagnostic testing. I don't recall anyone ever talking about masks. Okay, they didn't talk about PPE, and these were all professionals who've been at this sitting around the table, and I'm glad that Chairwoman Eshoo is agreeing with me. We didn't have that discussion. And now we are all suffering, our medical professionals, really, and our law enforcement and fire, who are truly on the front lines, are the ones now suffering the consequences, and now we have this huge issue. I want to talk briefly about the stockpile. Since you don't believe the stockpile is the way to go, most of America didn't even know there was a stockpile until this all happened. Most of America didn't know anything about all of these types of things until this pandemic hit. But so we have to have some supply. I come from Indiana, a manufacturing state. We have to have a supply chain. We have to be able to ramp up production. BARDA is all about partnering with the private sector. Many BARDA directors didn't get the job done based on what you said, not just Dr. Bright, but Dr. Hatchett and Dr. Robinson. They couldn't get the job done. So what do you, and we're going to welcome your comments later on as a manufacturer, and I represent a lot of manufacturers. If we don't have a stockpile, and if we don't have dramatic need for PPE, and let's, God forbid, hope we don't, a year from now or 2 years from now, but we might going forward for a while, what is the magic formula about ramping up production when we need it versus when we don't need it?
This is just my opinion. My opinion is to have a small stockpile that can be rotated through through America's hospital system. But as far as the bulk of the masks, I think we could come up with a different kind of mask that could be made so fast that you wouldn't need to stockpile. Because the problem the problem is how do you get masks to how do you get masks to people? How do you get millions of masks to people? Well, you can do it two ways. You can either have them in a stockpile where they could rot, or you learn how to make them faster. And with a concerted effort with a group like I was talking about, where you get some people and some smart people in the room, and hey, make it lucrative. Tell the American mask industry, here's what we want to do. I want you to figure out how to make a million masks a day on one machine.
But would that be a government contract, or would that be turning on the spigot so that the private sector can call those mask makers, hospitals can call those mask makers, because that's what's happening right now?
I think it could be both. I think the government should use the VA and DOD's business as a carrot. DOD and VA are buying millions and millions of dollars worth of masks. I'd love to have that business. So what I'm saying is, me or another American mask maker or combination gets that business and builds the machine or whatever. You know, I can't think through the whole thing, but there are ways to do that.
We could use your counsel, and while I have just a few colleagues here, the chairwoman and I have a bill, H.R. 6517, which is all about modernization of the stockpile inventory, and it is about making sure that we can move out expiring products, like expiring masks, before they expire, so that they don't get shipped to states, which I do think is happening, that some expired products are going to states. But I would encourage everyone, we're trying to modernize the stockpile, improve the stockpile, and we welcome your ideas and thoughts, and certainly wish that America had listened more to you starting in 2007, when you said the whole HHS information came to light. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Gentlewoman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Cardenas, for his 5 minutes of questions. Mr. Bowen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowen. Appreciate your persistence. I'm going to label you as someone who cares. It sounds like you care about employees.
I care about a lot of things. I love my country.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that.
Yeah.
I was gonna crescendo into how much you love our country, and I think that you love people beyond our country, because we're such an amazing example to the world when we do things to the level of our capability. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree.
And on this issue, I think you know as well as anybody, we are not doing our part the way we can show the world how to do things right, how to do things for the right reasons. It sounds to me that you have 13 years of trying to get many people, including the federal government, to understand that something's wrong, but it's not gonna take genius, nor is it gonna take more money than we could put together to do it. It just means that people need to listen, pay attention, and then implement. Is that a
Yes. Yeah, I always said it didn't take a lot of money. It just takes some change. We
Yeah.
got to do things differently.
I've never been accused of being a genius. Are you a genius, sir?
I am not a genius, and I'm not stable sometimes.
You're normal.
I'm normal.
Yes. Thank you. I figured that.
I describe myself as a goober with a conscience. I'm just a normal guy.
There you go. When you hear the term national security, the issue we're talking about today, just specifically masks, what does it have something to do with national security? 80,000 people have died, and not that every single one of them could have been saved, but 80,000 people have died during this pandemic in America. I personally believe that number didn't have to be that high had we done more things better, including getting PPEs or personal protective equipment, specifically masks. The right kind, by the way.
I agree with you.
So you said something earlier that much of I've been listening, and I really do appreciate you very much and your willingness to come and and speak to the American people, because you know you're speaking to Congress, but you're really speaking to the American people. This is live. Thank God some people are watching. You said something about stockpiling, and you mentioned a couple of times like the VA, et cetera. What I used to own a little business. I wasn't a manufacturer specifically, but I used to own a little business. I know what it's like to care about your employees, to know that if you had to shutter your doors or shut down a part of your factory, you know families are going to suffer, people you're close to, people that you depended on. So I understand, I'm getting that from you, that you do care about a lot of things, including the people that if you're going to put them to work, you don't want to lay them off later for no good reason.
Correct.
So the issue of stockpile, old-fashioned stockpile, where we allow these kinds of things for the rubber bands to break or what have you, which that happens, what I envisioned is, you may have alluded to, and I may be wrong, a rotation of some sorts, a cooperation of some sorts between a big entity like the VA to actually get a synergy of orders, and then also rotate that stuff legally and appropriately and safely and properly to other users before those items expire, so that we maximize not only production, but we minimize waste, and we actually get those products where they need to be when they need to be there.
If you got everyone involved, all of the big three hospital distributors like Medline and Owens & Minor and Cardinal involved, and then the government really would only have to, I'm thinking through this, but it wouldn't cost as much as a government stockpile if these people and us, all the people in the mask industry, if we all carried more inventory and the government subsidized just that part of it, they wouldn't have to buy the, I don't know, I'm not an economist. If we all work together, we could do that.
The thing that conservative taxpayers and conservative elected officials don't like is when you talk about subsidizing. But in reality, what the example you just gave, the brief example you just gave, in the long run, the taxpayers would end up spending less. The government would end up spending less. Everybody would end up spending less if we just try to figure out how to fill that gap properly.
Right.
That's what you're talking about, right?
Right.
So what I'd like to invite you to do, and you may have done it already, is I'd like to invite you to call my office, Congressman Tony Cardenas, and I will work with any of my colleagues so that we can introduce a bill to actually enlist and require that activity from the federal government of the United States, enlisting voluntarily and required by the government side to the government to require itself to damn well do that once and for all. And I believe that this would be an example about masks, but we're going to be able to cross-pollinate that amazing, cost-saving, life-saving example in other areas of responsibility.
The one thing that would be mandatory for that to happen is for America's hospitals to be willing to pay a little more for a mask, because nobody can match the prices. Yeah.
Look, I know some of my colleagues don't like the word mandate, but we can mandate that in a way where they welcome it.
Yeah.
And not with a stick, but truly a carrot. But like you said, they just have to understand how it will work in their benefit.
Yeah, I don't know what the solution is, but I think it's probably some sort of a government and private industry partnership.
Yeah, it's called a PPP.
I mean, the medical industry is full of people who care. You guys are people who care.
Right.
Yeah.
The gentleman yields back. It's a very interesting line of questions. I would just place something on the table here, the empty tables, and that is that it's one thing for a foreign country, China, to make sneakers and T-shirts and whatever. But we're talking about commodities that truly are part of our national security. And if anything has laid that bare, it is this pandemic. So this is another category, and we have to treat it as such. Chair is very pleased to recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter, for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bowen, very quickly, I've been in and out, so I'm still a little confused. Just help me clear up, because I owe my friend, the chair lady, 2 minutes, so I'm going to give those back to her. But I'm still confused about your current capabilities.
Okay.
You said you've got 4 lines that are just sitting dormant, sitting empty right now. Is that correct?
We have 4 idle respirator manufacturing lines, yes, sir.
And they're just, I mean, they're not being used right now.
Yes, but go ahead, finish your question.
Yes, they are not being used.
Correct.
Correct? So you said you've already got the machines for those lines. You don't have to procure them. The only thing you're going to have to do is to get staff in order to use those lines.
No, there's three things. We need to hire 100 people. We need to train 100 people. We need to get all the materials for that, and we need to get NIOSH approval. We bought those systems from a defunct Vermont mask company 7 years ago. We really don't even know how to use those machines. They're kind of a last resort. And if you'll go back and look at my email to Dr. Bright, I said this would be basically a pain to do, but they're here. And if we need this for infrastructure, let's talk about it. But what we've done in the meantime is we've gone from making 75,000 respirators a month. Think of that number, 75,000, to 2 million. And then in another 40 days, we'll be at 4 million from 75,000. So that's thousands and thousands of percent.
But you said you bought those. You bought them for a purpose. You bought them to use them, right?
No. Thank you for asking that question. No, they came as part of an acquisition. We bought a defunct medical company, and those machines came as part of the acquisition.
Okay.
And they're made in China. Again,
but
go ahead.
Did you say earlier that your phone's ringing off the hook? You got orders coming out of the yazoo? And
Yeah. Okay. But I can't go on a suicide mission. I can't ramp up, hire all these people for something that I don't know how it's going to end or how long it's going to last. And we did this. You got to remember, we almost went out of business doing this before. We ramped up and we spent money and built a bigger factory, hired 150 people, built more machines. And then one day, the business not only went away, it went smaller than it was, and we had to raise $1 million. We had to take pay cuts, and we had to fire 150 people.
So what you're saying, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but
I'm saying I need a long-term
you're saying you're not
contract.
going to use them, you're not going to fire them up unless you get a long-term contract from the government.
I'm not going on a suicide mission. Absolutely.
So that's yes. You're not going to use them unless you get a long-term contract.
Unless I get a customer who is going to commit to use those machines so I don't have to fire 100 people.
So that means that you'd have to have a long-term contract from the government in order to do it.
Yeah. Listen, we've gone from one shift to 3, 80 people to 200. We're making 4 times the products we made. We're making over 1 million masks a day. Don't you look at me and act like I'm sitting on my ass and not firing up 4 machines. It's not like just turning on a switch. It's putting people's lives, I'm not
Sir,
gonna,
I understand. Listen, I'm a businessman too, and I understand what it takes.
I sat and watched my business partner cry when he had to lay those people off. We're not doing that again.
So it's going to have to be a long-term contract from the government, though. That's my point.
From somebody.
I get it from somebody.
I can't hire 100 people based on a maybe.
I'm sorry?
I can't hire 100 people based on a maybe. Based on when's this going to end? Who knows?
None of us can, whether we're in the private sector or the public sector. We can't do that. We all understand that.
You're not risking your livelihood and...
Sir, I risked my livelihood for 30 years as an independent retail pharmacist. I never had I had contracts with nursing homes.
Why don't you buy my machines and hire 100 people? I'll tell you what, I'll give you my machines if you want to hire 100 people.
But the point is that you're here saying that I'm not going to do it unless I get a long-term contract from the government. I'm just trying to get clear.
Wait. No. Go back to the context. The context of that was in those emails. Hey, here's 4 machines. They're here, but I can't turn them on unless it's a long-term deal. I'm not just going to flip them on and have you flip them off and leave me hanging like everybody did last time. And let me tell you what happened last time. The government sits around, doesn't buy American-made products, comes to me in a pandemic, buys millions of masks in 2010. And you know what they do with those masks? They stored them for 10 years. Then they auctioned them to some knucklehead who put them on eBay and sold them for 10 times what they were worth. So not only did. Have I not seen the government in 10 years? I got to compete with my own masks, and I got to have thousands of phone calls from me from people who bought that 10-year-old masks of mine on eBay for $10, 10 times the price, yelling at me. And I had nothing to do with it. It's because the government waited and sold this stuff. So I've been hit from every side on this thing. We have bled for this country. We have created jobs. We put our factory in Texas when everybody else had already left the country. So don't sit here and judge me for 4 machines that aren't running that I'd have to hire and fire 100 people for. I'm not going to do it.
Not unless you have a long-term government contract.
Gentleman's time has expired.
How many times do we have to say this?
I now would, the chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Dr. Ruiz, for his 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen, for your testimony today, and thank you for trying to sound the alarm on the issues of mask shortage and reliance on foreign manufacturing for over a decade now, before anyone had ever heard of COVID-19. As you stated in your written testimony, relying so heavily on imported masks is a national security risk. And unfortunately, the last few months have shown us how vulnerable it leaves us during a pandemic. You, of course, already knew that and tried to do something about it, and unfortunately, those efforts were stifled. If your warnings had been heeded, we would not be in this situation now, where doctors and nurses cannot find the personal protective equipment that they need to protect themselves and do their job safely. We all have heard the stories. Doctors reusing masks that are meant for single use. Nurses wearing garbage bags because they're out of gowns. This is unacceptable. This is the United States of America, and our frontline health workers don't even have access to these basic supplies. That is why I introduced the Commission on America's Medical Security Act, which would direct the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine to assess the United States' dependence on foreign manufacturing for drugs and medical devices. That bill was included in the CARES Act, which was signed into law in March. Of course, the ultimate goal is a system that doesn't put our own access to critical supplies and equipment at risk, because we are at the mercy of other countries during a pandemic when they need those supplies for their own populations. It is a health security risk that puts American lives on the line, and therefore it is a national security risk. Mr. Bowen, when we get past this crisis and analyze the mistakes that were made in order to not repeat them in the future, how do we restructure a system so that we aren't caught in another preventable mask or other PPE shortage in future pandemics?
I'm not sure. I think we should put together a group of people that includes some of you all, and the mask makers and the mask distributors, the VA and the DOD, and come up with a plan. It's not rocket science, it's just logistics. And the military is really good at logistics. So
great.
And also, I think, too, just to be fair, again, I want to be fair with this. We couldn't, this is an extraordinary situation. I make masks for MD Anderson Cancer Center and the Texas Health Resources hospitals in Fort Worth and Cook Children's Hospital. Those are my 3 biggest accounts. And they're using, oh my goodness, they're using so many more masks. It's not just 10%, 20%, it's hundreds of percent. So could we have made sure everybody had masks? Probably not, but it would have been a lot better than it is now.
Well, if we would have heeded the warnings decades ago and created them and ramped up our ability to produce them, then I believe that we could have. There have been reports regarding the safety issue of some of the masks that have been imported in the past week, and also reports about the FDA pulling approval for over 60 manufacturers in China for N95 masks after tests showed that they did not meet quality standards. N95 masks filter out 95% of particles, hence their name, but some tests showed that many masks produced by Chinese manufacturers were, according to one CDC official, grossly under that number. One of the companies who had their approval removed filtered out only 24 to 35% of particles. As a doctor who was in the emergency department, I'm an emergency physician, during the H1N1, the prospect of this is horrible. It leaves those in the front lines taking the highest risk with a false sense of security and even higher vulnerability. And while I acknowledge that the FDA eventually pulled their approvals, it wasn't done before these masks were already in circulation here in the US. Can you comment on this development and outline steps we can take to protect our healthcare workers against substandard masks in the future?
That's not an area of my expertise. I don't know how masks get in the country. I don't know what foreign, I don't know how that works. So I don't have a solution for that, but it is definitely a problem.
Okay. Let's say the president fully and comprehensively used the Defense Production Act and worked with multiple companies in multiple industries to massively produce masks and all the ingredients needed, and created a supply chain, and also created a rapid response team of all the CEOs from those different companies. Would you be willing to participate in that rapid response team to handle a surge in the future?
I'm open to any reasonable type of thing. I'm not sure if, the government doesn't do real well managing a lot of different things, so I'm not sure if that would help.
Well, I think that's why the CEOs as a rapid response advisory team would be very helpful. Thank you.
All right.
Gentleman yields back. Pleasure to recognize the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Dingell, for her 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to start out thanking our Chairwoman Eshoo and Representative Susan Brooks for their leadership on understanding the stockpile and the need for the country to be producing these. And I think we really need to be talking about the medical supply chain. I'm also going to tell you, I'm a car girl, I'm a manufacturing girl, and I think we need to be making a lot more in America. I think that these times have changed us. I don't think people understood supply chain when we used to talk about it. I also think there's going to be a much stronger customer base for respirator. I used to call them ventilators, respirators, but the N95 mask that we're talking about, I think that there's going to be a permanent need in this country, and I think we have to talk about the stockpile as we go forward. It's not a new issue, Mr. Bowen, as you have and my colleagues have highlighted, and that's why we're all talking about the bills that we've got in, and I've got a good, strong, bipartisan bill with my colleague, Congresswoman Jackie Walorski, about the Medical Supplies from Pandemics Act that would reform the Strategic National Stockpile. I still think we need it to strengthen domestic production of PPE. And I'm also going to say that now you're just talking about a need for frontline doctors and nurses, but as people are going back to work, there's even a broader need for PPE equipment. We're reopening factories, and the supplier community and the car manufacturers are putting stringent production, new protocols into place, and they're going to have a need as well. So I think we're going to have to talk about what is supply and demand in this country, and how do we make sure that there's enough, and it's not only in times of crisis. I think there's going to be a market there. I mean, the fact of the matter is Ford Motor, you may not know that, is now producing N95 masks in my district in Flat Rock, Michigan. You were going to say something?
General Motors was kind enough to send consultants to us. They've worked with us for the last 30 days.
I know. So the companies are stepping up. But I want to ask you a question. I mean, Ford has, without any federal government order, has produced 23, I can't read this number, but they've been producing a lot of these masks and so far, so there is a market out there. But I want to ask you a question. Do you have any sense of how many more N95 masks would be on the market had the federal government taken you up on your offer to reactivate N95 manufacturing lines in January?
Well,
and can we be a little short, because I got a lot of questions.
7 million a month.
Okay. So, and the Medical Supplies for Pandemics Act that Congressman Walorski and I have introduced would authorize funding to increase supply chain elasticity but purchasing additional capacity for manufacturers like Prestige or Meritech for emergencies, and this situation underscores the need for future investment in the area. But, Mr. Bowen, you talked about previously that you had ramped up production of masks and hired over 150 new workers during the 2009 H1N1 pandemic to meet the increased demand. But you've since then described this decision as a mistake. Why? I mean, you don't think you could keep I actually agree with
No, because people stopped buying my products after the pandemic. I didn't need 150 people. Our sales went down. And there was such a glut in the marketplace, my biggest customer didn't order for 7 months. So not only did sales go down, some of my customers didn't order for a long time.
But you kept the equipment, the capital equipment that you had. I guess I'm trying to figure out, how do we keep production in America? I had 3 hospital systems that spent just $1 million on the plane from China to the U.S. to get these N95 masks and paid quadruple the price of what they normally pay to get the masks here.
Well, if they would pay 15 or 20% more during peacetime, they wouldn't have to do that. Because what they've done is, the hospitals have created this problem by trying to save money and chasing these products to China.
Well, I think we've got to bring the supply chain back to this country, period, so we don't have to chase them, and we've got to figure out,
But you know what's funny, though, is I see hospitals now in the middle of this saying, yeah, we're going to switch back to American, but only 25, 30%. They still want to buy Chinese products. So it's not going to all come back because people aren't going to pay for it.
I'm going to thank you, Madam Chair.
The gentlewoman yields back. And now I'd like to, there isn't anyone on the minority side, right? Okay. The gentlewoman from New Hampshire, Ms. Custer, for her 5 minutes of questions, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen, and thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. This here is a homemade mask, which is what people in my state of New Hampshire have had to do because we couldn't get the masks. And we tried in a bipartisan way. We have a federal delegation that's Democrat. We have a governor who's Republican. We all scrambled behind the scenes. And eventually we were told because we weren't a hot spot, we're a small state, we're a rural state, but we have plenty of COVID-19, and we couldn't get it. And so luckily, eventually, our entrepreneurs like yourselves stepped up. You may know Dean Kamen. He took 2 flights to China and came back with all the equipment, the supplies, the masks. And so we need to understand how we got here and why nobody was listening to you about the production of masks here in America. I want to just quickly revisit your exchange with Mr. Carter because I don't think it's outrageous that you would be looking for a contract with a price knowing that you would have a market. We do that in the Department of Defense all the time. How many tank manufacturers do you expect make a tank not knowing whether the government was going to buy it? Yeah. Right? I mean, that's where we are, right? We need your product to protect our people, to protect the American people. And my colleague, Ms. Dingell, is absolutely correct. Yes, it's the frontline workers. And I, every night, am thinking of sleepless nights of people going home who have been exposed all day long, and they're going home to their children because they didn't have the equipment that they needed. They didn't have... We wouldn't send our troops into harm's way, and we are sending our healthcare providers into harm's way. So just walk me through, if you will, what is it, when you warned of the mask shortage, what did you think? You said the U.S. mask supply is at imminent risk. Walk me through what you were trying to convey.
What I was trying to convey to Dr. Bright was that China was in the process of cutting the mask supply. and that China supplies about half of the mask supply. The mask supply was already tight, so imagine half of it going away. Now, here's what I didn't say. Mexico makes the other half. If Mexico gets in really big trouble, we might not get that supply too. Had China not been able to get their supply under, or their disease under control, and Mexico been in trouble, the entire U.S. mask supply would have been cut off. We dodged a bullet by just having part of it cut off.
Are you familiar in the Department of Defense with the Made in America and why we do that?
I sent Mr. Trump a letter in 2017. I sent it to everybody in his staff, and it said, please, I can give you the letter. It said, please, make the DOD and VA, or make the DOD use the Berry Amendment. Masks are covered under the Berry Amendment. We spent thousands and thousands of dollars with a government-type attorney who made a case that masks should be under the Berry Amendment because they are clothing, and the Berry Amendment handles military clothing, and they shot it down. And then I didn't get any response from the Trump administration. But I also wrote the Obama administration 20 letters, and they sent me a form letter back. So, yeah, you know, this is everybody. This is everybody. I'm not throwing in any administration under the bus. This is everybody.
You feel disrespected, though, in the process, and you were trying to protect the American people.
What's funny is I get really mad about this, and I tend to pop off, and I'm sorry. I didn't used to be like this. Let me say this.
You're frustrated.
I didn't used to swear. I swear now. I didn't used to swear before I got
We're all frustrated. Let me tell you, I have let loose a few words that my mother would be shocked by because people are hurting, right? We can't protect ourselves. What's your most fundamental... Are you a parent?
I have 5 children, 4 living. My oldest son... My oldest son died of the same thing that Mr. Biden's son died of, and I have 16 grandchildren. So
And every night you go to bed, you do anything to protect them, and that's the position we're in. We're trying to protect the American people. We're trying to protect our own families, and I wish you'd been listened to.
Let me see this. I'm getting 500 to 1,000 emails a day. I'm getting emails from people. Not businesses. I'm getting emails from moms. I'm getting emails from old people. Please, can I send me a mess? And
You make a product that can protect people.
I can't help these. I can't help all these people. And what's so frustrating is I said this for years. I've got every email I've ever sent all these people. And I've said for years, you can't wait. We can't wait till the pandemic happens before we do something about it. And it's time to fix it. We had 13 freaking years to fix it. And that's the travesty. But again, the thing that I couldn't figure out is why nobody hardly would listen. It was just universal. It's like,
Well, I'll just close by saying this. Note to self, don't eliminate the Office of Pandemic Preparedness. So thank you for being here with us today, and I yield back.
my pleasure.
The gentlewoman yields back. Well, this concludes our second panel. I want to thank you again, Mr. Bowen, not only for coming here today, flying across the country, all the complications that are part of that, so many flights canceled. When I spoke to you on the phone and urged you to actually come to Washington, you said, why? And I said, because I think you're a patriot. You've been on this for more than a decade. And I think you've more than proven that today to every single member that's here. Your story and your tenacity about a commodity that is a part of our national security, I wish people had listened to. But now it's our job to listen to you and to make sure that, that your crusade can essentially come to an end. You shouldn't have to spend another 10, 15 years knocking on doors. So your testimony, I think, has really moved the needle. And I hope that you will go home feeling gratified. You'll be totally satisfied when we really get this done. But I think that your testimony has been, you're a truth teller. Totally unvarnished and refreshing, I might say. We listen to a lot of witnesses here, and there are all kinds of styles in that, but yours is a special form of truth-telling. It's refreshing, and it's filled with the kind of content for us to not only understand, but that we take it and we run with it. I started out the hearing today by saying I never thought that I would chair a hearing. It is really so sad. And the backdrop of all of this are 80,000 souls that have been lost, that we are not meeting the needs of the American people in this crisis. When it comes to what you make, we can't even keep up with and make sure that doctors, nurses, healthcare workers have the supplies, the critical supplies that they need. That's shameful in our country. So we are very grateful to you for coming. And
Thank you.
We want you to stay healthy. We need you. And members will be able to submit, they all know that they can submit questions, and pursuant to the committee rules, they have 10 business days to submit additional questions for the record to be answered by the witness, in this case, yourself. And also, again, we ask you to respond promptly to any such requests. So thank you again, and I have just a little bit of housekeeping here. I request unanimous consent to enter the following documents into the record. Excuse me.
Madam Chair, unless it's absolutely required, I'll waive that reading of the list, if that's all right. And then it's my understanding there's some documents that we've had a hard time getting to you. And if we could ask that they be placed in the record without objection as well, with the understanding that you have to take a look at it to make sure it's appropriate.
Exactly.
But I don't
Reserve the right for the majority to review them, and having done so, then place them in the record. And I appreciate the gentleman agreeing or waiving the unanimous consent request.
Madam Chair?
Yes, you're recognized.
Could I just ask for the record that Mr. Bowen's letter that he made reference to be entered into the record?
And what letter is that?
You referenced a letter that you had sent to the administration about the making of masks?
Yes. I can send I can send the letters I sent to both the Obama administration and.
If you can get
That would
those
be
to us,
appreciated.
Mr. Bowen,
Can
then
that be
both sides can review, and with the approval, the agreement of both sides, we can place them in the record.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you like the letters that I sent to Secretary Mattis and other people as well?
Whatever you want to give us, we'll review.
Okay.
Be happy to.
And then if I might, Madam Chair, I know it was probably said in frustration, but as I indicated to you that I had a number of companies that had gotten back into the business, and one of those, Integrated Textile Solutions, says they'll take the machines if you really want to get rid of them. Just let me know. I'll
We'll work something out.
put you all together and y'all can figure it
We'll
out.
work something out.
On behalf of all of the members, we want to thank the committee staffs on both sides. This is our new way of operating. And as everyone makes the adjustments, you're doing the hard work so that we can make the adjustment to make sure that the directives of the Capitol Physician's Office has put out. And I can't thank you enough. I mean, I've been watching you, and I even said to Mike, you don't have gloves on. So thank you to all of you. I salute you. And again, Mr. Bowen, thank you to the rest of the guests in the room. Thank you. Now, maybe some of us are going to go off and have breakfast and lunch combined, something like that. I think we kind of earned our keep today with 6 hours of well-spent time on behalf of the people of our country. So with that, the Health Subcommittee is adjourned.
Thank you for the invitation.